They say blood is thicker than water, but in my family, it was thinner than the paper my mother's will was printed on. My brother walked away with the keys to the mansion, the luxury SUV, and a bank account that could fund a small country. I was left with a single battered cardboard box and a phone call from a lawyer who sounded like he'd just seen a ghost. But as it turns out, my mother wasn't just wealthy, she was brilliant, and she knew exactly who was who. The rain didn't feel poetic, it just felt cold. I stood at the edge of the cemetery, clutching the collar of my coat, watching my brother Julian wipe a single, perfectly timed tear from his cheek. He was a performer, always had been. To the world, he was the devoted son who stayed by our mother's side during her final months. To me, he was the man who hadn't answered her calls for 3 years until he found out the cancer was terminal. I'm Lily Rose. For 10 years, I was the daughter who stayed behind. While Julian was in Dubai or London, finding himself on mom's dime, I was the one navigating hospital corridors, arguing with insurance companies, and holding her hand when the nights got dark and quiet. I didn't do it for the money. I did it because she was my mother. But Julian, he was there for the harvest. The moment the casket was lowered, Julian leaned over to me, his voice a sharp whisper that didn't match his grieving face. I hope you've started looking for an apartment, Lily. I'm putting the house on the market by Monday. It's too big for one person, and frankly, I need the liquidity. I looked at him stunned. The funeral isn't even over, Julian. The business of life goes on, he smirked, adjusting his designer sunglasses. Mom loved me best. We both know how the will is going to go. Don't make this difficult. The reading was held in a glass-walled office downtown 2 days later. Julian sat there looking like a king ready to be crowned. When the lawyer, Mr. Sterling, started reading, it went exactly how Julian expected. The estate in the hills, to Julian. The vintage car collection, to Julian. The primary investment accounts, to Julian. I sat there becoming smaller with every sentence. I was left with personal effects located in the attic, at a small, locked wooden chest. Julian actually laughed. The attic? Enjoy the dust bunnies, Lily. I'll give you 48 hours to clear your trash out before the movers arrive. I left that office feeling hollowed out. I drove back to the house I had lived in and maintained for a decade, and started packing my life into boxes. Julian was already in the driveway, talking to a real estate agent on his cell phone, gesturing at the gardens I had planted as if they were just line items on a ledger. I went to the attic. It was hot, cramped, and smelled of old cedar. In the corner sat the wooden chest. It was heavy, bound in iron, with a note taped to the top in my mother's shaky, elegant handwriting. To my Lily Rose, the world looks at the surface, but you always looked at the heart. Open this only when the house is no longer yours. I reached for the lock, but my phone buzzed in my pocket. An unknown number. Hello? I answered, my voice raspy from the dust. Miss Rose? This is Marcus Thorne. I was your mother's private counsel. Not the firm that read the will today, her private attorney. We have an appointment that your brother doesn't know about. And Lily, you might want to sit down. The fun is just about to begin. I stared at the phone as the line went dead. Marcus Thorne? I had never heard that name mentioned in all the years of managing my mother's affairs. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Julian's laughter echoed from the floor below, followed by the sound of popping champagne. He was already celebrating his victory in the kitchen, while I was sitting in the dust of an attic. I grabbed the wooden chest and the small velvet pouch containing the key. I didn't want Julian to see me leave with it. I slipped out the back door, through the garden gate, and drove to the address Thorne had given me, a modest, ivy-covered building on the quiet side of the city. When I walked into his office, it wasn't filled with glass and chrome like the corporate firm Julian used. It was filled with books, the smell of old paper, and a man who looked like he'd spent 40 years keeping secrets. Miss Rose, Marcus Thorne said, standing up, your mother was a very strategic woman. She knew that if she left you everything up front, Julian's legal team would tie you up in court for decades. He would have drained you dry just to prove a point. I don't understand, I whispered, sitting across from him. He got the house, he got the money. I saw the will. You saw the public will, Thorne corrected, sliding a thin manila folder across the desk. The house Julian is so eager to sell, he doesn't actually own the land it sits on. Your mother moved the deed to a private trust 3 years ago, a trust that only matures when the primary residence is threatened with sale. I opened the folder, my eyes blurred as I read the legal jargon. Wait, if he tries to sell the house, the land title reverts to you, Thorne smiled thinly. And the car collection? They are currently on leaseback terms from a holding company, a company owned by the Lily Rose Foundation. Julian inherited the right to drive them, but he doesn't own the metal they're made of. If he misses a single maintenance payment, which he will, because he's broke, they get repossessed by you. My jaw dropped. My mother hadn't been delusional in her final months. She had been a grandmaster playing a game of chess, while Julian was playing checkers. But why the lawyer's call now? I asked. Because Julian just signed a pre-sale agreement with a developer this afternoon, Thorne replied. He just triggered the first trap. But there's something else. The wooden chest? Did you open it? I realized I was still clutching the iron-bound box. I pulled out the key and turned it. The lock clicked with a heavy, satisfying thud. Inside wasn't gold or jewelry. It was a stack of ledgers, handwritten, and at the bottom, a digital hard drive with a sticky note that read, "For the taxes." Your brother wasn't just lazy, Lily, Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave. He was skimming from your mother's accounts while she was sick. He thought she didn't notice. Those ledgers, they are the proof of every cent he stole. Your mother didn't want him in jail while she was alive, but she made sure that after she was gone, you had the leverage to take back everything he thinks he owns. I looked at the ledgers. Julian's signature was everywhere. He hadn't just waited for her to die. He had been robbing her while I was downstairs making her tea. What do I do now? I asked, a new kind of fire starting to burn in my chest. Now, Thorne said, leaning back, we let him think he's winning for 24 more hours. Let him sign the final papers tomorrow. Let him stand in that house and feel like a king, because tomorrow evening, we aren't just taking the house back. We're taking the bank account, the cars, and his reputation. I drove back to the mansion that night. Julian was passed out on the sofa, an empty bottle of expensive scotch on the coffee table. He looked so smug, even in his sleep. I walked past him, went to my room, and for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. The ghost daughter was about to become his worst nightmare. The sun rose on Monday morning with a clarity that felt like a warning. By 9 a.m., the driveway was cluttered with black sedans. Julian had invited the developers, a few of his high society cronies, and even a photographer. He wanted to document the moment he transitioned from a grieving son to a multi-millionaire real estate mogul. I watched from the upstairs landing as Julian held court in the foyer. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car, purchased no doubt with the money he'd skimmed from Mom's bedside drawer. It's a teardown, honestly, Julian told a man in a gray suit, gesturing wildly at our mother's hand-carved oak staircase. The land is where the value is. We'll level it, put up some modern glass boxes, and triple the investment. The man in the gray suit, a developer named Mr. Vance, nodded greedily. The contract is ready, Julian. Once you sign the transfer of the deed, the first installment of $5 million hits your account. I decided it was time to make my entrance. I didn't come down crying. I didn't come down begging for more time to pack. I walked down those stairs with my mother's wooden chest tucked under one arm and a folder from Marcus Thorne in the other. Morning, everyone, I said, my voice steady. Julian's face darkened. Lily, I thought I told you to be gone by now. This is a private business meeting. Take your trash and find a motel. Oh, I'm just here for the closing, Julian, I said, leaning against the doorframe of the study. I wouldn't want you to sign something without all the facts. It's bad for the brand, don't you think? Julian laughed, turning to Mr. Vance. Ignore her. She's just emotional. The loss has been hard on her. The only thing I've lost is my patience, I snapped. I walked over to the desk and dropped my folder right on top of Julian's contract. Mr. Vance, I'd be careful with that pen. My brother is trying to sell you the house, but he doesn't actually own the ground it's sitting on. The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from 3 rooms away. Julian's face went from smug to a ghostly shade of gray. What the hell are you talking about, Lily? The will was clear.
The house is mine.
The house is, I agreed, tilting my head. But per the Rose Family Land Trust, established by Mom 3 years ago, the land title is separate. It states that any attempt to sell or demolish the primary residence without the consent of the trust director results in an immediate reversion of the deed. And who is the director? Mr. Vance asked, his eyes narrowing. I smiled. It was the first real smile I'd had in a year. You're looking at her. Julian lunged for the folder, ripping it open. His eyes darted across the pages, searching for a loophole that didn't exist. This is a fake. This is some cheap trick you cooked up with a basement lawyer. Marcus Thorne isn't a basement lawyer, Julian. He was Mom's primary attorney for the things she actually cared about. The firm you went to? They just handled the public fluff to keep you distracted while she secured my future. Mr. Vance stepped back, closing his briefcase. Julian, if you don't have clear title to the land, there is no deal. In fact, my legal team is going to have a very long conversation with you about the good faith deposit I already wired you. Wait, no! Julian shouted, but the developers were already heading for the door. As the front door slammed shut, Julian turned on me, his eyes wild with rage. You think you're smart? Fine, keep the dirt. I still have the car collection and the 7 figures in the bank account. I'll buy a house 10 times bigger than this just to spite you. About that, I said, opening the wooden chest. I pulled out the digital hard drive and the handwritten ledgers. I did a little light reading last night. It turns out, Julian, that 7 figures in the bank actually belongs to the estate. Specifically the $3 million you borrowed while Mom was on morphine. And since you just admitted to having that money, I think the police will find it very easy to track. Julian staggered back, hitting the wall. The king was losing his crown, and the ghost daughter was just getting started. Julian didn't scream. He didn't even move. He just stared at the ledgers in my hand like they were poisonous snakes. The silence in the foyer was so heavy, it felt like it was pressing against the walls. For years he had operated under the assumption that I was the quiet one, the one who would just take the scraps and say thank you. He had mistaken my kindness for blindness. You're bluffing, he finally choked out, his voice cracking. Mom wouldn't do that. She loved me. She called me her golden boy until the day she passed. She called you that because she knew you loved the shine, Julian, but she knew I loved the substance, I replied, walking toward the large floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the driveway. And she knew that a golden boy who steals from his dying mother doesn't deserve the gold. Julian let out a jagged, hysterical laugh. It doesn't matter. I have the keys to the vintage Mercedes in my pocket. I have the keys to the SUV. I'll be gone before you can even call a deputy. I'll move the money to an offshore account. You'll never see a dime of it. He bolted for the front door, nearly tripping over his own expensive shoes. I didn't chase him. I didn't even raise my voice. I just checked my watch. 2:15 p.m., right on time. I followed him out onto the porch, just in time to see him clicking the key fob for the Mercedes 300 SL, the crown jewel of Mom's collection. He clicked it once, twice, 3 times. The lights didn't flash, the engine didn't purr, the car sat there, cold and dead. What is this? He roared, slamming his fist against the window of the car. What did you do to it? I didn't do anything, I said, leaning against the porch railing. But Marcus Thorne did. Remember the Lily Rose Foundation I mentioned? It turns out that holding company has a default and recovery clause. Since you tried to sell the primary estate, the land, you technically defaulted on the lease agreement for the entire car collection. The Foundation's security team remotely deactivated the ignitions 10 minutes ago. At that exact moment, a massive flatbed tow truck rounded the corner of the driveway. Behind it was another, and another. They're here for the recovery, Julian, I said calmly. You aren't driving anywhere. In fact, you're officially trespassing on land owned by the trust. My trust. Julian looked at the tow trucks, then back at me, his face twisting into something unrecognizable. The reality was finally sinking in. He had spent his whole life playing the system, but he had forgotten that our mother built the system. He was a tenant in a life he thought he owned. I have the bank account, he screamed, pulling out his phone, his thumbs trembling as he tried to log into his banking app. I'll buy my way out of this. I'll hire the best lawyers in the country. He stared at his screen for a long time. His face went from red to a sickly pale white. "What?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. It's empty," he whispered. "The account. It says frozen by court order." "Not a court order, Julian," I corrected. "A clawback. The ledgers prove the money was stolen from the estate. The bank has a suspicious activity protocol when a trust director presents proof of embezzlement. The funds had been moved to an escrow account pending a full criminal audit." Julian dropped his phone. It hit the gravel with a dull thud. He looked around the sprawling estate, the house he grew up in, the cars he coveted, the status he worshipped, and realized he was standing in the middle of a desert. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, his voice small, sounding like the scared child he had always hidden behind his ego. "You have 48 hours to clear your trash out, Julian," I said, repeating the words he had said to me only days before. "I suggest you start walking. The tow trucks need the driveway." I turned my back on him and walked back into the house. My house. But as I closed the door, I realized there was one more secret left in that wooden chest. A small, sealed envelope tucked into the lining that I hadn't noticed before. It was addressed to both of us, but it was marked, "To be read only when the throne is empty." The house was quiet for the first time in weeks. Outside, the rhythmic metallic clanking of the tow trucks taking away the cars was a fading echo. Julian was gone. I saw him trudging down the long driveway with nothing but a single suitcase and the suit on his back. No cameras, no cronies, no applause. I sat at the kitchen table and picked up the small sealed envelope I'd found in the lining of the wooden chest. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a single photograph and a final note. The photo was old. It was me and Julian as children, sitting on the porch of this very house, eating watermelon and laughing, before the greed, before the distance, before the golden boy persona took over. The note read, "Lily, if you are reading this, then Julian has chosen the path of the harvest, and you have chosen the path of the heart. I loved him, Lily, but love without discipline is just a poison. I knew he would try to take it all. I knew he would try to erase you. This wasn't a trap for him, it was a mirror. I wanted him to see who he was when the money vanished. If he comes back to you as the boy in this photo, forgive him. But if he comes back as the man who stole from me, show him the door. You are the keeper of this family now. Use the money to build the life you sacrificed while you were taking care of me. Be happy, my Lily Rose. You've earned it." I felt a tear hit the paper. She hadn't just been protecting the money. She had been protecting me from a life of being bullied by my own brother. A few hours later, my phone rang. It was Marcus Thorne. "Miss Rose, I just thought you should know. Julian tried to check into the Ritz using a credit card tied to the estate. It was declined, of course. He's currently at a bus station." "Let him be, Marcus," I said, looking out at the gardens. "He needs to learn how to be a person before he can be a brother again." I didn't sell the house. I turned the guest wing into a retreat for caregivers, people who, like me, had spent years looking after their loved ones and had nothing left for themselves. I used the Lily Rose Foundation to fund scholarships for students who had to drop out of school to care for sick parents. 6 months later, a letter arrived. No return address, just a postmark from a small town 3 states away. Inside was a crumpled $5 bill and a note that said, "First day's wages at the diner. It's not much, but it's mine. I'm sorry, Lily. J." I smiled and put the $5 in the wooden chest. Maybe one day the boy in the photo would come home. But for now, the house was full of peace. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just a daughter or a caregiver. I was free. Please tell me in the comments, from which city and at what time are you watching this video? End question. If you were in Lily's shoes, would you ever forgive a brother who stole from your dying mother? If you enjoyed this story of justice and secrets, make sure to subscribe to LilyCalmStories for more.